2 hours and 58 minutes. That's how long I'd been standing there while Damon Caldwell paced in front of the conference table, his voice cutting through the chrome-walled room like a blade. He was relentless, dissecting every decimal in the quarterly report, hurling insults as if numbers could bleed. 32 people sat in silence. Directors, managers, even the intern who had only started on Monday. Their eyes darted anywhere but toward me. Nobody intervened when Damon slammed his palm on the table so hard my water glass toppled, spilling across the papers I had organized with precision. Not a chair scraped back, not a throat cleared. It was as if they'd all agreed to disappear behind their silence and leave me alone under the spotlight. My blouse clung damp beneath my blazer, sweat prickling under the bright LED lights. My legs ached from standing, but I kept my spine straight. I forced myself to count every tick of the chrome clock on the wall behind Damon's head. Numbers steadied me. They gave shape to pain. "You are the biggest mistake in this company's history," he barked, his face inches from mine. I inhaled slowly, steady as a surgeon's hand. My voice came out even, almost polite. "Anything else?" "Sir." The room froze. Damon blinked, caught off guard. He expected tears or an apology, not composure. I gathered my papers, slid them into my folder, and walked out with measured steps. I didn't rush. I didn't bow. 32 pairs of eyes followed me, wide with disbelief. As I pushed the door open, I glanced at the pen clipped neatly to my folder. Its tiny camera light glowed faintly, hidden from everyone but me. Every insult, every slam of Damon's fist, every second of my endurance, it was all there. My silence hadn't been weakness. It had been preparation. In the parking garage, I finally let go. My throat tore with screams pressed into the steering wheel, raw and jagged until I could taste iron. But even as the sound shredded me, a single thought sharpened. Damon Caldwell had just written his own ending. And I already held the first piece of the story. Back in my apartment in Queens, the city hummed faintly through the thin walls. But all I heard was Damon's voice echoing from the footage. I sat cross-legged on the floor, laptop open, the small camera pen plugged in. Every insult, every derisive chuckle, every calculated pause as he broke me down, it was all captured in high definition. Watching it felt like pouring acid on my own skin, but I forced myself not to look away. Humiliation alone wasn't enough. Executives like Damon survived scandals. They thrived in them. He'd spin it as holding his team accountable or tough love leadership. I knew better. He'd done it before, and the company always turned away. Memory after memory spilled into the night. Damon telling me I had potential beyond my years when he first promoted me. Damon smiling as he handed me projects, only to take the credit when they succeeded. Damon closing the conference door just enough to keep me out of meetings where my work was being presented, and then the others. Anaya in legal, her career gutted after she dared to raise concerns. Thomas in product, his ideas stolen, then buried until he finally walked out. Damon had a pattern: elevate, exploit, erase. By two, my coffee tasted like mud, bitter and cold, but I kept drinking. Fear gnawed at me with every sip. If I moved wrong, I'd lose everything the career I had built from scratch, the reputation I had guarded like armor, the stability my mother depended on. Her voice filled the silence, as if she were in the room. "Mija, don't fight battles you can't win." I pressed my palms against the desk, whispering to no one. "This one, I can." I slid open the hidden folder on my laptop. 3 separate files glared back emails where Damon had shifted blame, reports with quiet discrepancies, accounts of meetings that told a different story than the official minutes, threads of rot, but not yet a noose. An HR complaint would vanish like smoke. Damon was too protected. I needed more than evidence. I needed allies. And I knew exactly where I had to start looking. The week after the conference room ordeal, I threw myself into work with precision so sharp it bordered on cruelty. My reports were immaculate, my presentations airtight, my team's numbers spotless. Outwardly, I was the model director, the woman who recovered quickly, who let nothing shake her. Inwardly, every keystroke and every slide deck carried a different purpose. I was hunting patterns, testing for cracks, searching for the ghosts Damon had left behind. I reached out to people who had once walked the same halls and carried the same ambition. The stories came in hushed tones, shared only after a glance over the shoulder or a pause too long on the phone. Nina Ortega, once the brightest mind in compliance, had been forced out after Damon planted whispers about her instability. Hector Villanueva, a strategist whose models could outpace entire departments, left in shame after Damon sabotaged his presentations to clients. They were brilliant. They were threats, and they were erased. Damon never left fingerprints. His cruelty wore the mask of corporate jargon fit issues, team alignment, strategic shifts, words sterile enough to pass through HR filters, vague enough to bury a career. That was why he remained untouchable. If I wanted to break him, I couldn't do it alone. I asked Imani Rodas to meet me at a quiet cafe in Harlem. She looked tired, the way people do when they've been overlooked too many times. 2 promotions passed her by, despite her metrics leading the division. I stirred my coffee once, then told her plainly, "I'm not here to complain. I'm here to act." Are you in her eyes searched mine for what felt like forever before she nodded slowly. I've waited years for someone to say that. Soon after, I brought Thomas Chen into the fold, the man who once wrote a report on Damon's expense irregularities, only to see it buried. Then Sonia Martinez from legal, who had raised conflict of interest concerns that mysteriously vanished from the record. Piece by piece, I built a coalition of the wounded. But alliances are fragile things. One evening, scanning through threads I shouldn't have had access to, I saw Damon's name beside a chilling line. "Alice is restless." Someone in my circle had already spoken. The betrayal came to light in the quietest way. Thomas lingered after a late-night meeting, his face pale, his hands trembling around a paper cup of coffee he hadn't touched. Finally, he blurted it out. Damon had cornered him, dangled the promise of a promotion, whispered about paying off his mortgage, all in exchange for keeping tabs on me. His voice cracked as he admitted he'd almost caved. For a long moment, I just stared at him, the weight of his words pressing down like lead. Then I surprised us both. "If you want redemption, prove it. Help me trace the money trail he's hiding." His eyes widened, and then something shifted in him, a grim determination. He nodded. Sometimes I realized. The ones who stumble hardest fight the fiercest when they get back up. But betrayal wasn't the only wound Damon had left behind. I began digging into HR archives, chasing rumors I'd once dismissed as whispers. What I found chilled me. Complaints of sexual harassment linked to Damon gone. Cases logged and then scrubbed from records as if they'd never existed. One name kept surfacing before vanishing: Zara Quinn, Damon's current assistant. I remembered her nervous smile in meetings, her eyes darting like she was always bracing for impact. Then, late one night, my phone buzzed with a single text: "Stairwell B-level garage, 7 p.m. I found her waiting in the shadows, shoulders stiff, gaze steady. She pressed a USB into my hand. "I'm not doing this for you." He called me replaceable. "I'm done," without another word. She walked away, back in my apartment. I opened the drive. The files spilled across the screen like an infection emails, proving Damon steered clients to his brother-in-law's firm. Spreadsheets showing he doctored division data to sync careers, mine included. Horror twisted with vindication in my chest. I finally had the dagger. But one wrong move, and it wouldn't just cut Damon. It would set fire to the company itself, taking hundreds of innocent jobs with it, and I needed a way to strike without burning everything down. The annual board retreat had always been out of my reach, reserved for the kind of titles Damon hoarded and used like armor. This year it was set at a luxury desert resort in Arizona, a place designed for exclusivity, for whispered conversations behind closed doors. I wasn't invited, but Sonia was. Her assignment deliver a 7-minute slot on regulatory compliance, buried just before the lunch break. We spent nights preparing, shaping her slides into a Trojan horse. The first half looked routine compliance metrics, regulatory trends, but halfway through, she would pivot to specific concerns regarding one executive, and with one click, a secure site would open. Every piece of evidence would be there: the emails Damon had written, the financial data Thomas had traced, the testimony from Zara's files. 7 minutes that could detonate his empire. Still, Damon was too practiced to miss the tremors beneath his feet. The night before her session, my phone rang with Sonia's voice taut with panic. Her slot had been cut to 3 minutes, rescheduled for the following day. Worse, Damon had cornered her at the reception, smiling like a predator. "I look forward to discussing your future here," he'd told her. I felt the walls closing in, but panic never helped me. Strategy did. I told her to hold steady, then called Thomas. During dinner. Create a disruption big enough to clear the room, but small enough not to end the night. Buy her time to get the CEO alone. He has to see it before tomorrow. Back in Queens, I paced my apartment until my steps wore a path into the floor. Every vibration of my phone felt like a verdict. At 8:23 p.m., it finally rang. Sonia's voice trembled. This time with disbelief. It worked. He saw the first 2 minutes and told me to bring it to his suite. He's calling an emergency session tonight. I dropped into a chair, my body shaking. For the first time in months, hope cut through the exhaustion. Damon was finally within reach. The call came 3 days after Sonia's midnight gamble. I logged in at my dining table, hair pulled back, blouse buttoned to my throat as though appearance could shield me. On the screen, Gerald Manning sat at the head of a long table, board members aligned like marble statues on either side. His voice carried the weight of corporate ceremony. "Mr. Vega, thank you for joining us. Mr. Caldwell has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. There will be no retaliation against you or your colleagues." I nodded, my face steady, my voice neutral. I understand. Inside, though, my chest burned. Administrative leave. The phrase was a mask, covering golden parachutes, settlement packages, non-disclosure agreements signed in sterile rooms. I had seen it before. Damon could walk away wealthier than ever. A predator washed clean with corporate polish. When the call ended, I sat motionless, staring at my own reflection on the black screen until the edges blurred. Then I dialed Imani. Her words came out in a whisper edged with fear. "We both know how this ends." I exhaled slowly. That's why we prepared Phase 3B. Phase 3B was the contingency we swore never to use unless the system tried to bury us. A digital dead man switch, designed with care and desperation. If Damon received severance, if the misconduct was swept under the rug, if any of us were forced into silence, the files would release automatically sent to regulators, journalists, and watchdogs who lived to dismantle men like him. That night, my apartment transformed into a war room. Laptops glowed across the dining table, cords snaking into outlets, coffee cups collecting in clusters. Sonia verified the legal language. Thomas mapped the financial triggers, and Imani built the distribution net. I typed until my fingers cramped, watching our lives shrink into code and encryption. We all knew the stakes. Exposure could mean career suicide. It could mean lawsuits, blacklists, reputations shattered beyond repair. But silence had already destroyed too many. By the time dawn pressed against the blinds, the switch was ready. Damon's future now hung on a wire we controlled. The days crawled, each one heavier than the last. Damon's office stayed dark, his nameplate untouched, his parking space a hollow rectangle in the garage. Whispers moved through the halls, speculation, denial, even sympathy. For 2 weeks, we lived in suspended silence, waiting for the axe to fall. Then, on a Tuesday morning, it came. A company-wide email flashed across every inbox, effective immediately. Damon Caldwell is no longer with the company due to behavior inconsistent with our values. One sterile sentence. No mention of misconduct, no acknowledgement of the people he had gutted, the lives he had twisted. No truth. That afternoon, I was summoned to Gerald Manning's office. He stood as I entered, his tone almost gracious. "Alice, I wanted you to hear it from me. Damon is terminated without severance. His influence ends here." I let him finish, then asked quietly, "And the people he destroyed? The fraud, the harassment, the conflicts of interest?" Gerald's smile stiffened. "These matters are being handled internally." I leaned forward, meeting his eyes with a steadiness I no longer needed to practice, then prepare for external handling. His expression cooled, the air thick between us. Is that a threat I didn't blink? It's reality. 3 days later, the company released a public statement. Unlike the first, this one carried weight. It admitted to systemic discrimination, pledged a third-party audit of promotions and evaluations, and even issued a formal apology to those whose careers had been harmed. Damon's name was absent, but everyone inside the industry knew. His reputation collapsed overnight. The golden boy tarnished beyond repair. Within weeks, my allies were elevated. Imani received the promotion she'd been denied twice. Thomas was asked to join a financial oversight task force. Sonia was named head of a new compliance initiative. Even Zara was reassigned, her path finally cleared of his shadow. On the surface, justice had been served. Yet as I watched the company pat itself on the back, I felt the hollowness beneath it. This wasn't reform, it was containment. Damon had fallen because we pushed. The system itself still stood, unchanged, waiting to swallow the next person who dared to shine. And I wasn't finished. The promotion came wrapped in polished words and a view of the Hudson River. Executive director. A corner office with glass walls and leather chairs, the kind of reward people at my level spent years chasing. Gerald himself shook my hand, telling me how much the company valued my contributions. Outwardly, I smiled, the perfect picture of gratitude. Inwardly, I knew exactly what it was, insurance, not recognition. They weren't honoring me. They were trying to keep me close, to keep me quiet. My mother visited that weekend. She stood at the window of my new office, hands clasped, eyes glistening. "Mija, you've won. Why keep fighting? You finally have everything you worked for." I joined her at the glass, the skyline stretching like a mirage beyond us. "I have a title. Yes. But the system that protected Damon, it's still here. Nothing has really changed." 6 months later, I slid an envelope across Gerald's desk. My resignation was a single paragraph. I leave to build a future where accountability is the rule, not the exception. Gerald looked at me as though I'd lost my mind. "Alice, After all this, why throw it away? I stood, calm and unshaken. You'll still hear from me, Gerald, just not as your employee. Vega Partners was born out of that moment, a consulting firm built not to shield companies but to force them to look in the mirror. Imani came first, her brilliance finally free to shine. Thomas followed, determined to build systems that could not be buried. Sonia left legal to join us, her fire rekindled. Even Zara walked through our doors, no longer replaceable, but essential. Our first clients were executives Damon had once forced out, people now leading elsewhere, ready to create cultures opposite of the one they escaped. We didn't just build a company, we built a counterweight. And as I looked around at the faces of those who had once stood with me in whispers and shadows, I knew the real fight was only beginning. 2 years later, Vega Partners no longer felt like a gamble. It was a force. What began in my apartment with laptops balanced on my dining table had grown into a firm of 27 people working with clients across 3 continents. We trained executives to recognize the early signs of toxic leadership, built whistleblower systems that couldn't be silenced, and audited promotions to uncover patterns that had once gone unnoticed. Where companies had once called consultants to bury problems, now they called us to expose them before rot set in. Ironically, one of those calls came from my former company. Their reputation, tarnished by whispers and stories that refused to die, drove them into our arms. Sitting across from Gerald Manning in a glass-walled conference room felt almost surreal. His hair had grayed, his shoulders sagged under the weight of years. "Alice," he said quietly, "you left a deeper mark than you realize." I didn't gloat. I only nodded. I wasn't here for revenge anymore. I was here to make sure no one else endured what we had. Meanwhile, Damon tried to reinvent himself. He launched a website calling himself a leadership coach, complete with staged photos of him smiling in front of whiteboards. But anyone who typed his name into a search engine saw the truth article after article, cataloging his misconduct, his downfall, his disgrace. Companies that once competed for his attention now treated his name like poison. His empire of intimidation had crumbled into dust. Some days I walked through our Brooklyn loft office, sunlight spilling across walls painted with murals our team commissioned to celebrate resilience. The air was filled with chatter, the sound of people who believed in what they were building. This was what I had fought for, and yet scars remained. I still caught my breath when a man's voice rose too sharply in a meeting. I still remembered the chrome clock ticking down those endless hours in that conference room, each minute carved into my bones. Victory had changed the game, but healing, that was another battle altogether. The ballroom in Washington, deep sea, buzzed with the polished cadence of executives, academics, and policymakers gathered for the annual leadership forum. When my name was called, I walked onto the stage, not with the weight of humiliation clinging to me, but with the steadiness of someone who had already fought her war. I told the crowd my story, though I chose my words carefully. What I did wasn't about one man. I said, scanning the rows of attentive faces, it was about systems that protect the wrong people and punish those who try to do the right thing. Damon was only a symptom. The disease was silence, denial, and complicity. Murmurs rippled through the room, not of shock, but of recognition. Heads nodded, pens scratched against notebooks. After the applause, as the crowd thinned, a young woman approached me. Her hands trembled as she clutched her bag. "My boss screams at me the way yours did," she whispered. "What should I do?" I took her hand, grounding her in the same way I once wished someone had done for me. Document everything. Find allies. You are not alone. Her eyes filled with something that looked like relief, as though simply being seen was its own kind of protection. Later, back in my hotel room, I stared out at the city lights. The nightmares of Damon's tirades had faded, replaced by dreams of laughter in our Brooklyn office, of clients who embraced change, of boardrooms finally listening. The 3 hours that once defined me no longer felt like a scar. They were the forge that shaped me. I had stood silent not because I was powerless, but because I was preparing for Tuesday, for every Tuesday after, for every fight that would follow. The humiliation had become a blueprint, not just for me, but for anyone who dared to believe that accountability was possible. And as I lay down that night, I understood at last survival was never the victory. Transformation was.